Today I'm going to show you how to make my backpacking baked beans and Bannok meal. So this is a pretty simple meal. As I've mentioned in other videos, and this first one you're watching, I'm a pretty big eater. I do like to eat big meals. This is the smallest meal probably that I take. So I have a nesting pot set, as you can see here. So this will make, this will fill this pot roughly half, or a little bit less, with baked beans. And as you know from my other videos, if you watch them, I usually aim for a full pot here. This is my large pot that I use as well. And this is my frying pan. So a couple things about this meal, in particular with the Bannok. Don't bother wasting your time unless you've got a non-stick fry pan. The Bannok will stick to it. You'll need a ton of fat to keep it from sticking if you don't. And invest, I use the word in quotation marks, invest in a flipper. So this is just a incredibly cheap flipper from the Dollarama, from the dollar store up here in Canada. It was like $1.25. I took the hacksaw or some kind of a handsaw and cut the handle off it for weight and so it fits in places. So you really need this to make Bannok well, unless you're going to cook it over a stick on the fire, old-fashioned wise. So this is a very simple meal to make. You take a can of baked beans, so this is an entire can of baked beans. You put it on your liquid tray in your dehydrator, and you dehydrate it, and it comes out crispy. And I'll kind of show you the texture a little bit. It just comes out in pieces here. These snaps like that. Dried baked beans, and the sauce and stuff is all in there. I believe these are baked beans with molasses is what these are. So it's an entire can of baked beans, and then you make your Bannok. So this is the Bannok recipe, which I'll share this with you. So I also want to tell you that I stole this from Matty the Goose. So Matty the Goose is a YouTube channel, another YouTuber, and he has some excellent tips, and he has a few recipes that I use faithfully. The shepherd's pie is one of them. And this is another one. Matty the Goose's, his Bannok recipe is easily the best. I've tried a couple different ones. This is the best. So I call this a full batch of Bannok. Usually what I take is a half batch, which is half this, which is good for a snack or a compliment, or you're hungry and you want to have something a little extra, and it's kind of that heavy bread. So what the Bannok recipe is, Matty the Goose Bannok recipe, is 1 cup of flour, 4 tablespoons of powdered milk. I like the whole fat powdered milk that I buy at the bulk barn. 1 tablespoon of baking powder, and a pinch of salt. And I just take the salt shaker and just put a little bit in, and that's how I do it. So this will make 2 big, we'll say pancakes. So 2 big flat pancakes, roughly the size of the bottom of this, about 3/4 of an inch thick. And I'll show a few things of making this out on the trail, but I mix it right in the bag. So along with the Bannok, I always double bag the Bannok, because you're going to mix the Bannok right in the bag. You'll add the water. You'll add the water into your bag. I got air in it. Trying to get that out. Oh, some flour came out. Woo! Like magic. So you'll mix your Bannok right inside the bag. You'll pour the water in, and you'll knead it inside the bag. And butter pats. So whenever I take Bannok, I always take butter. So I take 2 butter pats. Even a half Bannok, I take 2 butter pats rather. So I skimp a little bit when I take the full batch, which is this for this meal, because I want more food to go with my smaller portion of the beans, a can of beans. So I put the 1 butter pat in for each half batch. So I'll mix this, and I'll dump it roughly in half batches inside my frying pan. So I'll use the bag so I don't get it all over my hands. I'll squeeze it out in there. I'll shake it down. I'll have the butter in there melted first, and I'll keep moving it over the fire. So a bit of a technique to doing Bannok. Not that difficult though once you get onto it. I pack my butter separate in with my Bannok as well. I'll close that up. Ta-da! And there we go. Baked beans and Bannok prep. So we'll see you out on the trail. Alright, tonight's meal is really simple. It's one of the more simple meals that I bring. It's baked beans and Bannok, so it's a full batch of Bannok. In the prep video, I failed to mention the sugar that's supposed to be in the Bannok. There's a tablespoon of sugar that goes in a full batch as well. So I got a little bit of leftover water from my morning coffee that I boiled. Everything is either boiled or filtered, so usually filtered, but I do make coffee out of the lake water. You just pour your beans in. There's your beans. The beans will absorb quite a bit of liquid, so I usually make sure all the beans are kind of covered. I let them sit. Now the beans, the longer you rehydrate, most everything is the same way, but the beans can be quite firm if you try to rush them. So the longer they can rehydrate, the better they'll turn out for sure. So there's the water. We're just going to let them set. We're at camp. We got a couple hours before supper, so they're just going to sit there and wait to be cooked up. Alright, so the stuff is rehydrated, so let's carry on with our supper. So here's the rehydrated beans. So I'm a little bit heavy on the water side. So like most meals, first thing I'm going to do is bring it to a boil. See how things look from there. So that's been soaking for a couple hours. Time is your friend with rehydrating. So I'll bring the beans to a boil, and I'm going to make the Bannok. So while that's boiling, I'm going to mix this Bannok up here. I'll take my butter pat, put it in my pan. Oh, I got a pine needle in already. Oh, it's going to be a good meal. Pine needle's there already. Can't get it out. See that guy right there? He's bound and determined to be digested. There we go. So those smell like beans for sure. So in the meantime, while I'm waiting, I'll take some filtered water. Ouch, that's a hot pot. In case you didn't know, if you have your stove on, it is hot. If you put your knuckles on the side of your hot stove, you will burn yourself. I just found that out from personal experience. Okay, so I got some water in here. I'll seal my zipper seal up. Down here, maybe where you can see. I'll knead the Bannok, knead the water into the Bannok. And the zipper seal popped, as it often does, which can be pretty frustrating because it's messy. Try not to make a mess out here. We're not trying not to do anything that would attract any critters to the campsite. We're trying to keep food in our bellies and not on the campground, campsite. Alright, so I got a pretty good amount of water in there. I made it the other night, the second time I made it on this trip. It was a little bit too stiff, the batter. This a little more liquidy. It'll have a little more of a resemblance of a pancake. What I did the other night was more like a biscuit as far as its consistency. All of that is fine. I put a bit of air in the bag, which is contributing to my issue with the seal breaking or popping. Alright, I'm going to let just a little bit of air out of the bag, like so. Have a look inside. Still very doughy. Oh yes. And that's how you make a mess in the backcountry. The seals don't seem to want to stay closed on these bags. You can see my mess there. What I'll do is I'll scrape that up with some sticks. You can see it there. I'll scrape it up with some sticks. And there's my, excuse me, boiling beans. So, if you can see that, I put a little bit too much water in for rehydrating. So I'm going to let that boil just a little bit more than normal to try to condense it a little bit. So I'm going to turn my heat up. If I put too much water in like I did there, I turn my heat up. I let it boil more aggressively to condense down, because right now I got bean soup, which is okay. It's not like that's bad, but we'll see her roll and boil. Those beans are just, I got them boiling good. I'm just going to let them sit and put the cover on them. I got the cover on them over here just to let them cool down, and we'll see if they'll thicken up a little bit. I'm going to turn my heat way down because you want low heat for Bannok, and melt the butter. Now Bannok is a bit of a practice skill. I use butter pats, but you can bring butter however you want to. Bring it in a container, whatever. You just need enough butter on your non-stick pan to kind of keep your stuff from, your Bannok from sticking as you fry it. So I wouldn't, there's two things I wouldn't do this with, and I've done it before. I've done it before without a non-stick pan. Not a good idea, because it sticks and it's very hard to clean when you're out in the woods. And I wouldn't do it without the flipper, because it's very hard to get that flipped. So my Bannok is going to have to be good enough, because, oh yeah, it's very powdery. I didn't get it mixed very well. Oh, it's terrible looking. Look at that. Oh, terrible. It's going to be a doughy. So I'm going to try to get this off, like so. I'm going to try to knead this a little bit more. So, unfortunately, I've got a bit of a mess going. On an easy meal, I got a mess. So I got my dishcloth here, which I'll be using to clean my pots and stuff anyway, and I'm using it to wipe the extra Bannok off my hands from the bag, because maybe it's just as well this happens, because this happens sometimes when you're making Bannok. The seal's going to pop as you're mixing it up, and it's going to cause you headache, because it's messy. So I'm going to try to reseal this. You can see that. I'm going to try to reseal this and try to mix it some more for my second pancake, so to speak, my second Bannok. So this is just going to be a little bit floury, so when you're eating it, there'll be a bit of floury packets. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing bad about it. It's just, you know, it's just a little bit floury. So I'm just kind of kneading it some more here in the bag, and it certainly seems to be mixing up a little bit better. And I popped the seal yet again. So once the seal pops the first time and you get Bannok in there, it's very difficult to get it to seal again. It's probably not going to happen, to be very honest with you, so you might as well be prepared for a messy run. Okay, so I still got too much heat going. I can smell my Bannok burning as I'm distracted with the pop bag. And I burnt one side of it. This is going to be a fantastic video. This is going to be like the how not to make Bannok in the backwoods. You're welcome. So I did burn one side. So I got one side that's just packed with flour and one side that's burnt. So this is the pot I'm going to eat my Bannok out of. So when my Bannok's cooked, I'll put it in here, and I'll put the cover on it to keep it warm. So I keep shaking it, trying to keep it from sticking to the pot. So once one side firms up, then you try to keep it moving on the pan like this to keep it from burning. You see little bits of stuck here in the side. So tonight we're going to have bean soup, burnt and flour Bannok, I think. I should be changing the name of it. no matter your best efforts, sometimes when you're cooking out in the woods, sometimes things don't turn out exactly like you want them to. Just the way it is. So a lot of times when I'm making Bannok, especially if it's kind of thick and doughy like this, it didn't get mixed up, I'll kind of press it down once it firms up, and that lets some of the inside liquid bubble out. Something you could also do, depending on your pot set, is you could put your cover over the top to kind of heat the heat in, to try to cook the whole thing top and bottom at the same time. Now, that's not something I normally do, but it's something that can be done. Well, it smells good anyway. You can see, even though that was very floury, as it's frying up, it all kind of mixes in. That flour, it's going to be a little bit floury, a little bit of flour or dry patch spots rather. Alright, there's the first one done. So it doesn't take too long really to cook Bannok, even on low heat, even when you burn one side, like me, burnt. So I'll put the cover on this, put it aside. Now, meantime, I've left the heat on, so I want to quickly get my butter in my pan. The pan is much hotter now, so it's going to burn that or melt that butter in a hurry. See if we can do a better job on the second one. Just kind of squeeze that out. Now, if everything goes good, you don't get any on your hands or on the ground. Everything is in the pan and then eventually in your belly. But when things don't go quite as good, like my supper this evening so far, some of it gets on your hands, some of it gets on the ground, some of it might get on your nose and up your nose and all over the place. So sometimes if you don't make a mess, you can use the outer bag to keep from making a mess, but I'm beyond that, unfortunately, tonight. And you just make your second patty. There, it's sliding already. So as soon as that bottom firms up, she'll slide around. You just kind of keep it moving. A little bit of butter in the pan. There's not a lot of butter in the butter fat, but it's enough to kind of keep things moving. If you cook it on too high a heat, like I did initially, it'll absorb the butter very rapidly into one side, and then when you flip it, like I did, you've got nothing on the second side to help brown it up. This one's turning out much better. As soon as the edges kind of get firm enough to flip it, I want to flip it over like that. Again, that resembles a pancake. That one looks much better than my the first one, where it's you know, Gordon Ramsay, if you're watching this, you'll be upset with me. I butchered it. He may grab my ears and say, "Are you an idiot sandwich?" Well, not tonight, I guess. I'm having a bit of a sandwich though. 2 pieces of Bannok and some bread. Alright, that needs to firm up a little bit more. As you can see around the edges, you see the liquidy Bannok has just kind of popped out. This one was actually quite a bit better mixed than the first one too. In the meantime, while that's cooking, I'll keep an eye on my beans, which are still very watery, and are probably going to be very watery like soup because I've got too much liquid in them. I am going to boil those and condense those down though, and I probably won't do that on camera, but I'm just going to bring them back to a boil with the lid off it. I'll boil them, not vigorously, what's the word I want? Vigorously, I guess. I'll let them boil, strong boil, and I'll let it boil for a while with the top off the pot to try to condense it down. I'll show you the end results, good or bad, when it's all said and done. You see I'm kind of pushing on it and pushing out the extra Bannok. Okay, so through some persistence, I was able to get my beans quite a bit better. They're still a little bit more watery than I'd like them to be. So I guess I would call them watery beans. So I was able to, I can see the boil ring along the outside of the pot, so I was able to condense about half an inch to almost 3/4 of an inch of excessive liquid that I had in there. And what I did is, after I turned off the camera, I finished that Bannok up, which was basically done, and then I brought that to a hard rolling boil again. I boiled it for 2 or 3 minutes, well, maybe even longer, maybe even up to 5 minutes. I let it boil, just rolling boil. Then I turned it off, let the cover off it, and let the extra steam and stuff escape, and then I brought it to a boil and let it roll again. I left it for about 5 minutes uncovered. I brought it to a rolling boil again for another couple more minutes, and that's kind of the end result, which is going to be edible. It tastes pretty good, a little bit on the watery side. And then I've got my 2 Bannok patties here, which have unfortunately gotten cold as I've sat and played with my beans, but again, that's the way it goes. Please don't report me to Chef Ramsay. He won't like it. There we go, beans and a Bannok on the trail.